All right, welcome to Sierra Mountaineering Club's Making the Transition to Mountaineering seminar. We're broadcasting from our headquarters in Sacramento, California, and welcome to all of you that decided to come and be here in person. We have about an hour-long presentation, and I'd love to field your questions, so please don't be shy. I'm here with the gear, a whiteboard, and the presentation, so hopefully we can cover everything you might want to know. Our goal is to help you make the leap from backpacking or possibly climbing, like rock climbing or some other form that's not fully fleshed out like mountaineering, or scrambling into mountain climbing. So let's go ahead and head on to our first slides. So some of the first things I want to ask you all, maybe get some audience participation, is what are you into mountaineering for? What do you want to get out of it? What are some things you might?
Adventure, camaraderie.
Okay, adventure, camaraderie. Okay, I think I've got those up there. Who else? What about you?
I've climbed lots of mountains, but it's never been in a mountaineering kind of environment.
Okay, so. Good. Meaning like there's snow on the mountain this time,
Yes.
right? Okay, or it's high in altitude.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
Those are important distinctions. Okay. I'm looking at you.
I've always wanted to do it just because I've had other family members actually climb Mount Shasta.
Okay.
So it's kind of always been
Yeah. So as a specific
I've
destination.
lived at the base of Mount Shasta for many years and
Good.
Never climbed it.
Okay. So there's lots of different objectives that you can pursue. Some will have snow and some won't. Some will be high and some won't. Some will be hard climbing and some won't. And some will be local and others will be very far. Wherever you go, though, you're going to get some version of these sorts of things. All of these are important to me as a climber, and as a club, what we try to do is get people together so that they can take on and experience these factors while they're climbing. And it's not always a sunny, easy route that we climb out there in mountain climbing. Sometimes it's hard and difficult, and sometimes we don't make it to the top. But it's still a rewarding experience because we go out with people who are interested in having an adventure on the mountain and who are enthusiasts like we are. So let's head on to the next slide. Come on in. So for our purposes, what we're describing is mountaineering is a human-powered sport, and what we're looking for is to summit or get as high as we can on what I would call significant topographic objectives. So it has to be a landmark of some significance. And to do that, if you think about all the different types of peaks that there are around the world, you can imagine that there's going to be a lot of skills that a person is going to need depending on what they want to accomplish. So that could include all or any of these items here. Climbing itself, we like to break it up into ice, rock, and snow, but there's also glacier climbing. And a lot of times those mediums are all existing in concert with each other. So you may be climbing a glacier and then transition to snow and then go to rock and then ice. There's also a lot of other general skills that you need to have highly honed for mountaineering, like knowing your way around the landscape and how to get yourself to and from places, how to camp in bad weather and high places where people haven't camped before, possibly how to ski or snowshoe or other methods, dog sled even, or wilderness survival, because that's important. We sometimes are in pretty harsh environments. So where do you begin? I mean, that's a pretty big list there. Maybe you've done some of these in the past. The goal of the club is to help provide experiences for all of these. Let's head on to the next one. If you guys have any questions anytime or comments, please let me know. So how I think this happens, we're trying to structure it this way, is there's a couple places where you can enter into mountaineering. That would be number 5, okay? Let's say perhaps that you already do rock or snow climbing. So in that case, you're really only about one step away from getting into mountain climbing. You just need to round out some of your navigational camping skills perhaps, and then you can start mountain climbing. Or maybe you're a peak bagger, which is somebody who does hiking and scrambling and maybe goes to objectives that are easy or close to the trail that don't require technical climbing. In that case, then you need to go to rock or snow climbing and then go to mountaineering. Or maybe you're a backpacker. So if you know how to travel in the outdoors and camp, then first I would say you need to learn to kind of go off trail to objectives and bag some peaks, and then of course go. You see the progression, or maybe you just drive to a campground and get out of your car and sleep. In that case, we can still work with you. You know how to camp, but then we can teach you how to travel in the outdoors, how to camp there, and on down the way. So go ahead.
Can you tell me what peat bagging means?
Peat bagging is scrambling. It's going off trail to usually lower peaks that are close by where you might be backpacking or hiking, but it doesn't involve any rope work. So non-technical sense. So wherever you come into it, we want to put all that together and help you get onto climbing mountains that do sometimes require technical ascents, or at least some sort of specialized skill to ascend. All right, let's head on to the next one. So these are the things that everyone's going to need to make the transition. One thing, of course, one of the easiest first things to mention is that you're going to need specialized gear. You guys just walked through our retail partner store, and you're in the backroom space right now. So just want to mention that Bobcats Outdoor does have 50% off sale going on. So if you're interested in that, it's open to the public and not just members. They're trying to unload a lot of mountain hardware stuff. So you can talk to Oliver at the break between the seminars if you want, or now if you want to get the best gear. But it's been going on for a week or more. You're also going to need. Let me back up. So specialized gear. So one advantage of being a part of the club is that with membership dollars, we purchase gear which is available for loan for free on official trips. So that would be things like you see here, except for clothing on the table. Like ice axes and crampons and harnesses and tents and stoves, etc. So we have all that stuff for loan and official events. So you don't necessarily need to go get it right away. You just make sure that we know you need it, and we'll bring it out, and you can try it out. You're also going to need technical skills training, and then not just training, but the chance to practice it. So you can get the initial training from us, and you can do it online, or you can do it in person in the field with us, and then you can put together your own groups and go out and train, or you can come back for official events with us and get practice. And we rank all of our trainings and all of our climbs using a certain scale, which I'll show you here in a while. You're also, sadly to say, you're also going to need to work out in mountaineering. You can't just walk up, get off the couch and walk up the top of Shasta necessarily. But to the extent that you are physically and mental, a little bit of toughness is important, mental fitness too, you'll have a better time and you have a safer time. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So another thing you're going to need is, you're going to need good people to surround yourself with. So you need to find a community of people you can trust. And that's one thing that I'm proud that we try to do, is help people meet each other and build a community where we can have some sense of trust and confidence in the people we're climbing with. And then you're going to need some good data, some good knowledge, some good information about where to go and when and what to expect on the routes and how to get it done. So it's a very all-encompassing sport, which is why me having climbed 20 years, I'm still very excited about doing it, because I'm just scratching the surface and what's available. So there's lots to do. So making that transition, let's head on to the next one. I'm giving you a little bit more detail here. So rope work, so referring to travel off trail and then camping in unestablished camp areas. Okay. In terms of work, the people you work with, they don't just need to be nice people, but they need to be people that you can count on when things are not so rosy out there. When you're in a whiteout, when people are tired, you're hungry, maybe you don't know exactly where the route goes, etc. And we sometimes, depending on what level you get into mountaineering, sometimes the climb might go for a very long time. It might go for up to 18 hours or more. So that's a long time to be working at it. So, and not just specifically, good outdoor equipment, but something that's appropriate for the conditions you're in. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Planning is important. Knowing about logistics is key, like food and travel and forecasting with weather, and even orography, which is the study of mountains and how they're formed, because that shapes how you climb them, what protection you use, and what you can expect when you're on certain aspects. And then physical fitness is great, but not just general like CrossFit perhaps, or even gym climbing, we're talking about long-term endurance. That's a key thing, especially cardiovascular endurance. So, and then mental acuity. You got to be smart and you got to be wise. Okay. This one, there's a good bit of suffering out there. That's part of. You got to pay the price. Okay. So, the summit is not a place that everybody can get to, unfortunately, because it requires some real effort. But when you put that effort forth, it will come back and reward you. And then we need to make some assessment about risk and then understand what we're getting into and how big of a bite we're taking and how to manage that risk. Because there's no part of any of our lives that are risk-free. It's about managing the risk that we encounter. So same thing in mountain climbing. And then some other good medical skills and prediction skills like avalanche and first aid. That would be useful as well. Okay, that's a long list. Questions about any of those or additions? Yeah.
What? Give me some specifics of what you're talking about when you're talking about the art of suffering. Just
Okay.
some specifics.
Well, when you're moving up a slope that's say 4,000 feet long and you have a 40-pound pack on, at some point going up that you're going to be like, wow, this is not so fun.
Okay.
But you're like, okay, I have a goal. I'm working towards it.
Right.
You know, so it's not a thrill ride. It's what we call hard fun.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn to realize that there's a bit of that. There's a lot of toil involved in mountain climbing.
Example might be, all right, you're already camping and maybe you're spending a night somewhere and all of a sudden the wind kicks up and like the whole tent is just like vibrating like
Yeah.
you know, and like you can't hardly sleep and you're kind of wondering if the tent's gonna make it, you know, so there's a little bit of that mental toughness too.
Yeah. So there'll be some parts that'll be hard.
Yeah.
You know, I just want you to know that it's not always roses out there. Okay? I think you did. But I just want to make that very clear that there's some suffering that's inherent. All right, let's move on. So if we look at some of the parts of modern mountaineering, what we practice in the club is what we'd probably call traditional alpine mountaineering, which is just good old mountain climbing with people. And some specific elements of that are ice climbing, which is water ice, alpine ice, that's old snow and frozen water. Okay, like you would find at various times of the year. There's climbing on glaciers itself. Then there's like high altitude expedition mountaineering. Like of course I would have to say Mount Everest, since everyone has heard of that. That would be called expedition mountaineering. Long term, very involved, complicated, and somewhat dangerous climbing. There's free climbing, which is climbing without protection, okay? Or, I'm sorry, free soloing, which is climbing without protection. Free climbing is climbing with protection, but not climbing on the protection, which happens to be aid climbing, like people would do on El Cap, okay? Then there's bouldering, which is also climbing without protection, but only to a certain height. And scrambling, which is kind of a sort of climbing, but not very steep or very tall. And then sport climbing is where you're climbing a rock, but the bolts, the pieces of protection are already established. So as you climb it, you clip those. So your protection is done deal. You don't have to worry about that ripping out. And gym
You still have to
climbing.
worry about them ripping out.
Well, yeah, not as much. Not as much as in traditional climbing, which is this one I skipped right over. Traditional rock climbing, which is climbing and placing your gear in the rock yourself, making an assessment on its worth, clipping it and climbing on, and then your second would clean that stuff. So there's nothing left, but you did use gear along the way to protect yourself. You're not climbing on it, but you're using it as a protection against catastrophe. And then gym climbing, which probably doesn't need any explanation. So this is all mountaineering in my book, and it's all different types of climbing. So it's a pretty broad sport. Here's how it works. This would be climbing the rock and using protection, okay, for, protection against catastrophe. So that would be bolts or gear that you place or already established anchors. And then this would be climbing on the gear, like via ferrata, which is one I didn't mention, which is already established cables that you climb, and you use those as safety lines, or a route that you climb using cables as safety lines. And then aid climbing, so that's climbing on the gear. This is climbing without gear, bouldering, scrambling, and free soloing. And this is multi-conditions like alpine climbing, which is snow, ice, and rock all at once at altitude, and winter mountaineering and ice itself, ice and snow. One thing we'll want to point out is if you're going to make the transition to mountaineering, you should get this book. This is the latest 50th anniversary 8th edition Freedom of the Hills by the Mountaineers. It's what we call the Bible of mountaineering, so it has kind of all of the information that you'd need in one place.
Put that on our pack as we head up the hill.
No, there's a much better way to do it. Put it on your phone. I do have it on my phone.
Wow.
Didn't take up much space.
Cool.
That way, you're in camp, you're like, how do you tie that knot again? It's all there. All right, let's head on. So let's talk a little bit about some components so you guys can start working on it. One of the first things I want to talk about is how to rate the different types of routes that you might get on. So you may have heard of a route being called something like, let's say, 510, for example. And what does that mean in relation to a hiking trail? So class 1 would be hiking. Okay, class 2 would be something that's simple, scrambling or a rough trail. Class 3 would be a place where you might be using a hand as you travel through the terrain. Class 4 would be probably both hands and both feet, but most likely not with a rope, and it may be steep and possibly exposed. And then class 5 is where rock climbing begins, and that's where you're going to use both hands, both feet, and some extra thing like a rope and protection. And from 5.0 to 5.10, it goes in solid integers. Okay, and then after 10, it's broken up into A, B, C, D. So it goes all the way to 515D. And this is the Yosemite decimal system, which is only one of 6 or 8 different types of systems, but that's the one we use here in America. So class 1 to 515, that's how it works. Let's go. So this is, for example, climbing the Mountaineers route in late April. It's got some scrambling, but we may or may not use a fixed line, depending on the exposure. It's class 3. It's not actually rock climbing. It's rock scrambling, even though we're doing it in crampons and boots and stuff, so it can still be challenging, but wouldn't be graded that way. And then as another version of how we describe routes, we also ask ourselves how long will it take to do the technical portion. So it goes from grade 1 to grade 6. Grade 1 is a few hours, grade 2 is half a day, grade 3 is most of a day, grade 4 is a day and then some. So this would be a grade 1. Only takes 1 day to do the technical portion, only a few hours really to do the upper chute, which is what you're looking at here. So some of the risks that we're going to encounter while we're out there. Here's a nice little list. This is a lot of the stuff we're going over tonight is from various portions of our training courses. We talk about this one in almost all of them. The main reason for bringing this up is for us to realize that there's 2 main types of risk out there that we have to deal with, and they are the objective mountain risks that are always there and the subjective human factors that we bring with us. Which of these 2 do you think we should pay the most attention to? I saw one hand pointing to this one. That's correct. But this is actually the one that receives a lot of attention sometimes. What's the weather doing? What's the rockfall like? What are the snow conditions like? Is all that good? Yeah, that's good. Okay, let's go. Did you talk about your team? Is your team ready? Do they have the right skill? Do they have the right physical, fitness? Do you have people on your team who are risks, in and of themselves? Do you have the right state of mind? Did you research the route? Do you have wise decision makers? Have you been there before? Do you know how to get off the route? Do you know how to get to the route? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. So that's why this is what really makes a difference, is having this in hand. This is important, but don't forget about human factors. Go ahead and head on to the next one. I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit. So one key thing, make sure that we know what we're getting into. So this is why you want to take it somewhat slowly. This is great you guys are here tonight to learn about that. I wouldn't recommend that you go straight on to a super hard route that's got lots of technical portions with limited ability to get off the route or escape. That's not appropriate. So you got to do it just a little at a time so you can understand the consequences of increasing technical difficulty and commitment. And then make sure that you're able to practice making good decisions with other people in a good group, and you can discuss it and understand why you're doing what you're doing. Make sure you have some people with experience or that you get experience while you're out there over time. There's a little saying that the best judgment comes from bad experience. So what I suggest is learn from other people's bad experiences. Okay. And then there is something to be said for being fit and going fast. That'll keep you safer. You'll spend less time in dangerous areas. You'll have more fun. So let's head on to the next one. As we look at how to manage the risks, this is a nice pyramid which shows you that, yes, there are fatalities in climbing, okay? But for every one fatality, there's 200,000 unsafe acts that happen. That's a pretty good ratio. So what we want to find is a way to identify these unsafe acts and prevent that from happening. That'll cut down on near misses, minor and major injuries, and the incidence of fatality. So it really starts here with what we're doing on the ground, what decisions we're making, and the actions that we're doing. If you go to the next slide, it shows us that while we're moving through the process of the trip over time, if we get all of our planning and preparation in hand and get everything we're going to be doing, and if we see things that are warnings, we need to bring them up, especially if more than one person is feeling a little off. We need to discuss that, and we should always have the ability to turn around, the option to turn around, I should say. So, because the number one objective is to return home safely, not the summit. Let's go on. So that can be sensed by things you feel, stuff you see, or stuff you know. And if you get enough of these concerns, even if you get a whole bunch of little concerns, they can add up to a big concern. So it's not just like one big problem. It could be a bunch of minor little decisions that didn't seem important at the time, but once they stack up on top of each other, they equal a big issue. So let's say, for example, your party didn't move quite as fast as it needed to, and you didn't have quite the right amount of gear, and the weather was a little bit worse than you thought, and you actually forgot the batteries in your headlamp, or your headlamp wasn't as fresh as it needs to be, and somebody was feeling sick, but they didn't tell, and then you forgot to sharpen your crampons, and then, and then you're spending the night out. So let's go on. So some of the tactics that we use to travel through the terrain, these are probably the four that I will discuss. So first one is moving unroped. We could call that soloing, or we could just climb that scrambling, or having fun. Then the next stage to manage the risk would be we would move as a team, but we would place protection as we're traveling along. That's called a running belay, or simul climbing. Probably what you've seen in movies, or maybe you've done it yourself, which is you build an anchor, a leader stretches out the length of the rope, placing intermediate protection, builds a belay anchor, and then brings the team up. So it's kind of a leapfrog thing. And then there's also, for large groups or long distances where the rope needs to be employed, there's fixed rope climbing. So the rope can be stretched or a series of ropes can be stretched long distances, and as you climb the route, you're tethered on a safety line to that fixed rope, or actually climbing on the rope itself. So as security increases and speed increases, okay, you'll see that soloing is the fastest but the least secure. Running belay is a little bit less fast but a little bit more secure. Raid climbing is yet slower but more secure, and fixed rope raid climbing is the most secure of all, with some minor exceptions I won't go into tonight, but is the most secure of all, but is the slowest. So you have to strike a balance between security and speed. That's our goal. So how do you guys train for mountaineering? How many of you have been involved in sports or have trained for sports before? Raise your hand. Okay. Been on a team of some sort? Okay. A good bunch of you. All right. So you know the value of sport-specific training. I think the main thing to do is to make sure that your cardio or aerobic endurance is as high as you can get. So we're talking about long, slow burn. Endurance climbing could involve moving with the pack for a long time. Maybe getting to base camp might take you, on Friday it took me 9 hours to get to base camp. So it could take you 2 hours, it could take you much longer. And then on the climb itself, you're going to need to be able to go for a long time. Some portion of strength needs to be talked about, but your core is probably the main thing that we'll want to work with. And then it's important that you have some sense of nutrition, what to eat out there, and how to recover, because sometimes your sleep won't be so great. Like Larry was saying about the tent rattling, or maybe your mattress got popped that night. Or you've been just many days at working hard at this. So. All right, can we move on to the next slide? So some of the skills that you'll need for being out there, one is learning how to find and establish an effective base camp, and that's going to require that you have some knowledge of what sort of shelters to use, the stoves that you're going to use out there, and where you should put that camp. You also need to know how to find water, prepare and plan for the food, and use halfway shelter situations like bivouacs, so that you can be up on the route and not have to carry everything with you. Let's head on to the next one. The main thing that we want to help you learn, especially in courses like Mountain One, is navigating to the camp. So that might involve some portion of the trail, but a lot of it might be off trail. And then once you get to base camp, figuring out how to find the route up the mountain and back to your camp. So those are two somewhat distinctive skills. Some common errors that we might make on route finding. Sometimes there's an overemphasis on route descriptions. The guidebook authors are really clever at telling you how long it's going to take to climb the route, and my opinion is that I haven't been able to meet those very often. Conservative on how long it's going to take your group to get up that. Another one is that because it's just easier going downhill than uphill, without knowing it, we will gravitate towards low places. So make sure you don't do that. Also, not having an ability to get you into trouble, because you're 4 miles off, 2,000 feet lower than you think you are. And so this is a fun game, misjudging progress in the route. Hey Bob, how far do you think we've gone? At least a mile. No, definitely not. Half mile, my friend. Always just cut it in half. Whatever you think, just cut it in half, and you'll be right. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So, yeah, exactly. So, maintain a moderate level of activity all day to keep warm, because you don't want to either sweat or get cold. Okay, you want to be dry and cool. That's your goal. Not hot and wet. Okay, because then you'll be cold and wet. Use your sleeping bag as a clothes dryer. I really mean this. And take off your socks, your gloves. If there's excessive moisture, I would wring them out, but I would put anything that obtained moisture during the day in your sleeping bag, and in the morning it'll be drier, if not all the way dry, if you have the right sorts of fabrics like wool and nylon. We carry, if you put hot water in them and put them in your bag with the lid tightly closed, then you will generate some heat. You can put them in your crotch or armpits or behind your neck. That'll be a good spot to have them. What else we got? Water freezes from the top down, so if you store your water bottles in reverse to that, then they won't freeze the threads. You heard it here first. Put on a fresh pair of socks when you arrive at camp. Carry a fresh pair of socks would be the first prerequisite for that. Socks. Never leave home without a fresh pair of socks. That's my goal. That really refreshes you more than you might think. Your feet will take a beating, so that's the number one goal. And then, since you can get cold by standing or sitting directly on cold surfaces through the principle of conduction, you want to not do that. So that's why your boot soles have insulating wedges on them. So the same thing with your rear end. Don't sit on ice or snow. Get a pad or a sleeping bag or a jacket or a backpack, which is like a mobile backcountry couch for you. You can sit on your backpack at any time and keep yourself from being directly on snow or ice. Cotton is the death cloth. All right, that's all I need to say. It's like, except for when you're in the desert. So just don't use that. Synthetics are better. Wool is still king for almost anything. A couple other things. We're being very eclectic tonight. So avalanche awareness and basics. You need to have some understanding of what snow slides, where they occur, and how they occur. So here's a couple key things for you all. Number one is you want to be able to assess and acknowledge avalanche terrain and know when that occurs. You want to know when the unstable snow is and what that looks and feels like, and you want to avoid being a trigger or being there when a trigger occurs, because those three things are all needed for an avalanche to occur. So let's head on to the next one. When we're looking at mountain features, let's go over a couple tonight so you can So you can know where those are. So this would be the horn right here, or the summit. This would be a ridge line that emanates from the summit. This would also be a ridge line here, but this one is very knife edge, so we call that an arête. That's a French word, I think. And so an arête is sharp enough that you could probably sit on the crest and hang a leg off each side. This is a cornice, which is a frozen wave of snow. As it blows, it kind of crusts up and overhangs a cliff. So that's a particular hazard we deal with. This is a glacier with icefall and seracs in it. And this is a saddle or a col or a pass. So those are some of the main terminologies that we use for mountain climbing. There's more. I'm just giving you a sketch and a bunch of stuff tonight. Let's head on to the next one. Some others that you might want to know about. This one, not a coulier or a cooler. It's a couloir, pronounced as a W here. And it is a deeply incised garbage chute, basically, with hard snow and ice that's encased between rock walls. Or skiers would call it a chute. A narrow chute, probably. This is a hanging glacier. This is the glacier. This is the Bergschrund, which is the big crevasse at the head of the glacier. This would be the face or the head wall. And the summit, of course. This is an ice arête. These are gendarmes. They're like towers on an arête. And this would be the debris from an avalanche.
Like Castle Craig's is the gendarmes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another. A lot of the terminology comes from Europe, French, Italian, German. I forgot a buttress. That's a broad sort of footing of a mountain. Okay. This one in particular happens to have a ridge on it. Okay, right here. But if it's a distinctive ridge line or a knife-edged one, it will be called that, not a buttress. So buttress is quite broad and spreading. All right, let's go on to the next one. Some of our favorite features on mountains are glaciers, which makes them so awesome. There's a couple glaciers in California. As a club, we were right off over here this weekend. But this is the Hotham Glacier on Shasta. This is the Bolen Glacier. That's the Whitney. This is somewhere in Alaska. I sure wish this was in California. And then the Palisade is another big one that's in the High Sierra, in the Palisades. So glaciers are moving rivers of ice that we have to negotiate because they open up in what's called crevasses, where you can go into the glacier and get stranded, hurt, hypothermia. So it's important to learn about them, learn how to predict crevasses, and protect against a crevasse fall. So that's part of mountaineering too. It's a very unique environment to live and travel and climb in. A couple knots. Let's do some knots. You guys want some ropes? Here we go. Why don't you take these and pass this out. And on this side, I'm going to reserve one for myself. Looks like I got maybe enough for people. Possibly you could share. Let's do a couple knots tonight you're going to need to know as you transition into mountaineering. One of the first knots that I'll have you tie is a figure 8 on a bight. So this is a bight. You can grab the rope and pull it together like this. A bight is just two strands that you tie as one strand. And I would take and form a loop with that strand. And then if you were to make this into an overhand, you would feed it through directly. But in this case, after you make your loop, I want you to go around one more turn and then go through. And that yields this knot here. So that's a figure 8 on a bight. Yeah. Okay.
No.
All right, let's do it again. So start with the bight. Form a loop. Come around one more time and then poke it through the eye. And that's a figure 8 on a bight. All right, what do you use it for? Thank you for that question. You use it for a anchor. So this is one piece of protection, this is another piece of protection, and this is your master point where you equip your master carabiner. Okay, so this is an elementary and very fundamental anchor knot. for
It's sort of like
mountaineering.
it's too small.
Let's head on to the next one.
That, like, when you tie in, that's-
I'm not going to do all the knots, but I'm going to do a couple. So figure eight follow through begins with the same motion on a single strand. Okay. So come on back up, camera. All right. So this time I want you to grab an end and form a loop right up here, and then come around again, and then poke it through, making this nice little guy like this. Okay. So that's the first portion of your figure eight. And then I want you to take whatever tail is longish and put it through a belt loop or around a chair leg or something. And come back up to your knot. You're going to follow it through, right? So every bend and turn. Follow the twists and turns of the rope.
Basically start right here. Follow that through.
And what is this knot used for? I know some of you know this.
I'll always tied on my harness with it when eight climbing.
Right. Okay, so this is a tie-in knot. Okay, so when you tie into the rope, you'll be a good partner if you don't have to say, how do you do that again? They'll be like, you really are a newbie, aren't you?
Come here, honey, let me do it for you.
So if you can learn how to tie your own tie-in knot, that's one step toward independence. All right? And that's it. Figure eight follow through. All right? Because we're short on time. But here's a couple that I'd like you to know about. And again, in Mountain 1, Rock 1, Sig 1, many of these, you'll learn these knots. This is called a taut line hitch. We use it in place of those kind of annoying plastic toggles on tents. It is a friction hitch that's adjustable. So when you tie this to an object like a rock or something, you can tension the guy line on your tent without retying it. So taut line hitch. All right, next. The alpine butterfly, I will tie for you real quick, but I don't think you're going to get it. But this is a knot that you tie in the middle of the rope so that you can clip in like the middle person on a three-person rope team. Oh, there we go. I already tied it wrong. Okay, let's do it one more time. I do know how to tie this knot. I just went too fast. There we go. So that looks like this. And then you can clip into it.
Can't you just use the figure eight for that too?
You could, but this is better. This is better because under tension with both strands stretched out like this, in full weight of a climber, it'll easily come untied and it pops up in a nice perpendicular fashion to the rope, whereas a figure eight would be flopped to one side. All right, let's go on to the next one. The Klemheist knot is one of a family of friction hitches that you can tie, but this one's particularly nice because you can do it with not just round cord, but also runner like this that's flat webbing, along with the prusik and the auto block. It's a favorite knot for traveling on fixed ropes. Here's the prusik, and that's the kind of the classic friction hitch that grabs both ways. You can use it to ascend the rope. So if you clip in here and you've tied this knot correctly, you'll scooch it up the rope, weight it, scooch it up the rope, weight it, and if you use two of them, then you can climb up any rope.
They make gear for that too.
Yep, they do. But remember, this is the transition to mountaineering. I'm talking about the basics. They make all kinds of complicated mechanical gear for lots of this stuff. Another one that they also make gear for, called a belay device, is the Munter hitch, which is another way for belaying. So, real briefly, that one would be tied by putting a loop of rope through the locker. Oh, sorry, I should have given you the heads up. And then flipping and clipping it through. So one way it feeds, one strand is belaying and one strand is lowering, and then it flips over and does the same thing. So it's a nifty little knot. It will mesmerize you for days as you flip it back and forth. So it allows you to belay and lower without making a messy transition or having to use a belay device. Okay. And then the bowline, which is a good old knot that we used to use for tie-ins, but you can tie this around a tree or any sort of an object. And it's fairly easy to untie. Square knot we can use to tie two ropes together or send a package to grandma. But it's not used a whole lot, but it's a very simple knot that can be demonstrated very quickly. So you're going to go left over right and then right over left. You know you tied it correctly if you can feed the loops together like this. That's the square knot. All right, next. Okay, so now we get to talk about some clothing. We got about 15 minutes and gear. When we look at the systems that you're going to need for mountaineering, you may have heard of the 10 essentials before, maybe. So these are things you don't want to leave home without. I'm not talking about your MasterCard. I'm talking about things like how to get out there and not get lost and find your way using a headlamp and having a first aid kit, being able to make a fire and having something to eat and drink and shelter, that sort of stuff, and the right sort of clothing. So they're broken up into systems nowadays best rather than actual discrete items. The systems can be described any number of ways. I recommend that you look that up and go through that mental checklist until you've got it down as you get into mountaineering. Let's go on. One key thing off the item is water. This is one that a lot of people would worry about because you don't have the campground spigot out there. So what do you do when there's no running water? What do you think?
Wait for rain.
You could wait for rain. That'd make your chances of success very slim. What else? There's no running water. How are you going to get it? There's no running water.
Melt snow.
That's right. Melting snow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Snow.
maybe it's running underneath the snow. That happens too. You have to, dip something really deep and pick it up. It's important that you drink more than you think out there. Okay. You will be losing water a lot more than you'd suspect because you're working hard, you're going to be breathing, and you're losing that every time you take a breath. And at high altitude, you're going to lose more. It's going to seep into your clothing, and you're going to be dehydrated if you don't deliberately consume at least a gallon of water a day out there. This is general rule of thumb. So you're also going to need to know how to melt snow and filter and be creative because you literally cannot climb without water. You just can't. And if you have a malfunctioning stove or aren't able to acquire it, your climb is over and you could be in danger. So much more important than food. That's still important, but water's key. Then the food itself, we don't do any cooking in mountaineering. We just don't have the time. The conditions are bad too. Imagine trying to scrape out a pot that had a 5-layer lasagna in it at 0 below. So
Should just peel right out.
yeah, just bang it against a rock. But you just don't want to do that. So normally we would bring prepackaged or conveniently combined foods where you could, like, for example, put an energy drink while getting hydrated, you're also getting liquid carbs, or something that's something that you can just rehydrate, like this package here, freeze dried stuff, or something that sometimes you can use some of these things that they're like heat and serve. They're a little heavy, but you don't have a microwave out there, but you do have a pot of boiling water. You could throw that in there and heat it up and eat it. So, or you don't cook at all. You just eat dry foods, or possibly all the calories that you get are liquid, like this. You squeeze them out of the container, okay? Or some combination thereof. So food, water, and now into clothing. There's a lot of materials that I want to point out to you. The highlights are brand new still in terms of the industry. Soft shell is a key thing that we'd like for you to know about, which is this stretchy nylon spandex blend that's fairly warm and very breathable and still water resistant, which is like the awesomest type of fabric that we have available to us now. Also, down is amazing still. And the good old stuff like polyester and polypropylene, nylon blends, those are all great fabrics. And we want you to be able to combine those in thin layers that do specific jobs. So let's go on to the next one. I'll kind of talk about what those are at, what those are. Starting at the top, you're going to need a warm hat, maybe a sun hat or a balaclava, which will cover up these very exposed portions of your face. Let's move on to the next one. You're going to need to have a system of gloves and not just one. So maybe a thin pair of gloves for tasks which require dexterity, a thicker pair of gloves when you still need dexterity and need some warmth, and possibly another something that goes over that, like a mitten, that is important to wear when you need warmth first, and dexterity should take a back seat. And possibly that those can be modular. They can fit inside of each other and be swapped out. For in terms of base layers, we want to have something like this. This would be a good base layer because it's got the ability to vent. It covers up your neck, which is a place where you lose a lot of heat, but if you open this up, you can vent a lot of heat out of this part of your body. It's long sleeve, so for the same reasons that it'll conserve heat when you have your sleeves down, it'll vent heat when you pull it up. It's also nice for sun protection, and it should be fairly long, somewhat athletic cut. Color is not an important consideration. But it would be stylish. This is a very stylish.
You don't want it white.
Yeah, you do. White's good because it reflects.
It's hard to see when you're buried in snow.
That's
too.
true, but it's not as hot as black. It depends on what you're looking for. So
Want to be found. That's
Yeah.
what I'm looking for.
this one is fuzzy and warm on the inside. This is a nice base layer. Okay, let's move on. So mid layer would be something that kind of traps, not kind of, but exactly traps heat by virtue of it having some sort of distance. So you want something that's thick-ish or puffy-like, okay, or has the ability to provide some air barrier between your shell and your base layer. It should also wick a little bit. So fleece is good, thin synthetic, thin down, or soft shell. Soft shell is a great option for this, top and bottom. Let's go on.
For pants.
For shell jackets and pants, by definition, you would want something that's waterproof, but a lot of mid layers like soft shells that are simply water resistant will work for a lot of the time. And lots of the stuff that you would use shell jackets for doesn't involve water. It actually involves wind. This is a great thing to have to cut wind and also as an extra layer for warmth. So you should always bring your shell jacket whether or not the weather looks like it's going to spit on you. It's always something you should bring. Base layer, mid layer, shell. Also for your feet. Okay, base layer, mid layer, shell. Okay, let's move on. Did I say feet? I meant legs. Also for your legs. And then over the top of that could possibly be a belay jacket, which is like what we call a puffy. Okay, so that helps you to stay warm when you're not moving, like at a belay, for example. You might be standing in one spot feeding out rope for 30 minutes while the wind's blowing and snowing on you. And then it's time to get moving, so you strip off your belay jacket. You're in your action suit, and you're climbing, generating a lot of heat, trying to vent, and then you stop. You're at the belay again, so then you got to put the jacket back on again. So it's more convenient to have it on the outside than try to take off 2 layers, put it on, put in your shell again. So it goes on the outside your shell. All right. For feet, wool socks. Go ahead.
Before you move on to that one, if the conditions are ridiculous and you're already in your Gore-Tex down here and your hard shell up here, would you put on the puffy underneath that and then put your shell over the top if the conditions are just
Yeah,
out of hand and you need to go down?
possibly, yeah. Depends on whether your puffy is any way weather resistant, that it has some sort of coating on it, or the down is
It would just
hydrophobic.
be water resistant,
Yeah.
but you would still put your shell over that, right? In
If you could
conditions
fit. A lot of times, though, the puffy is XL on purpose, so it can fit over everything,
Okay.
and it probably wouldn't fit underneath your shell jacket.
Okay.
It would be like too tight. Might even get it zipped up.
Okay.
So
Thank
yeah, good question. So for feet, pretty much wool is the only game in town still. Probably will be forever. Especially the new merino type wool that companies like Icebreaker and Smart will have. It's just awesome stuff. And also for base layers. Another piece of equipment you're going to need is a gaiter. So that's a connection between the tops of your boots and your pant legs. That's a favorite place of snow and rocks to get into. So, and when you're post holing through deep snow, it's nice to have an extension on your boot top so that you don't get snow in your socks. Let's head up to the next one. Boots itself. I didn't grab a boot. This is the type of boot that we'd recommend for transitioning into mountaineering, which is a 3-season lightweight mountaineering boot. It looks kind of like a hiking boot. The difference is that it's got a stiff shank that goes about 3/4 of the way, and only the front part of the toe bends. On the back side, it has a clip for a crampon bail, and it's waterproof with a flexible ankle and 2 eyelets over the top. So it's more than a mid cut. It's an actual boot. Okay. So if you get those items, that's kind of what we're looking for. You can also pick up plastic double boots, and those are probably not your first set of boots, but as you move on into the sport, you'll want something that's even warmer and more stiff. Eyewear is important. This is one place where you do want to spend some money. Your eyes are so, well, we all know that we all agree that eyes are key. So you want to make sure that you got something that gives you full coverage from the intense sun at altitude, and it's got 100% UV, possibly polarized and photochromatic, which means that it'll lighten and darken depending on available light. So you can wear it in all conditions. And even goggles would be good to have. I used them on Shasta last weekend.
Okay.
Some of the other items that we recommend that you get would be things like a strong headlamp. Okay, don't worry about weight or cost. You want a good, strong beam. You might spend a lot of time in the darkness traveling. A watch that maybe has an altimeter on it. A sharp knife. Collapsible water bottles. That way you can carry water up to, say, 3 liters. A good compass with a sighting mirror on it and possibly luminous dial and a cord. Just fully featured compass would be helpful. A good topographic map that's marked, and some other nice things on here. Snow shovel, stuff sacks, camera. There's a whole bunch of little tools you're going to need. So let's head on to the next one. And then for your personal gear, a helmet like this would be nice. It's hard shell on the outside, collapsible polystyrene type foam, one impact, absorption foam on the inside, and then sort of a cradle so that it can take some beatings in the mountains and still keep you safe. Let's head on to the next one. Technical gear, probably the type of harness that would best suit you to get started with mountaineering is something with no padding like this. This is the Black Diamond Couloir. You can see it's about the size of a soup can. It does have some gear, but that is used as a safety system. And unless you're doing a lot of rappelling, you're not going to need padding on it because you're going to be wearing clothing anyway. Keep yourself warm and safe out there.
Instead of buying another harness, using your
Sure.
rockland harness
Yeah,
is just
absolutely.
fine. Yeah.
You can use the one you have now if it's rock or whatever. If it's padded, that's fine. Just optimally, that one will work better because of its reduction in savings, reduction in price too, but also weight and space. This is a runner. You're going to want a few of these. You're going to want some non-locking carabiners, some locking carabiners. You're going to need some sections of cord to build a prusik from, like 4 to 5 millimeter. You're going to need some longer cord, around 6 millimeter, to use as a cordelet, which is an anchor system. And all of these are used for various applications. So you're going to need some of your own personal equipment, some soft goods, in addition to your metallic hard good a few thousand feet. The other device that you might need is a belay device, which I did have here at some point.
Free.
That'll work too. But first learn how to use an ATC style tube slot device like this. Alright, what's next? And crampons, of course. And mountain axes, the icon of mountaineering. So these are spikes that affix to your boots, and they come in various sizes and styles, but this style here is just a simple 10-point crampon with horizontal front points that'll strap onto any boot. So it doesn't have any specialized clip systems, and it's adjustable for the size of a boot. They run about they're used for various purposes. Okay, let's head on to the next one. Trekking poles, shovel, snowshoes, all these things you can loan from the club or buy as not critical first item equipment, but you might use sleeping bags. So a 30 is there's the good old canister nowadays, and the other type would be a white gas stove, which is a little more preferred. This is liquid fuel in here that has to be pressurized and primed, but it produces more firepower, especially at altitude. It's a little more tricky to use, but these are the two types that we'd use in mountaineering. This one, when it really counts. Let's go on to the next one. And then some of the gear that we're going to use. These are pickets or snow stakes, ice screws, cams. These are, or this is a semi-active chuck called a tri-cam. We'll use all that stuff depending on where we're climbing and what our needs for protection are. All right, what's next? And then tents. We're looking for a 4-season tent with a ground sheet, full coverage fly, and guy lines on it, or a 3-season tent that we really know how to use. And this is the next one. Some of these other shelters might work, like a tent-like shelter that you can dig out the bottom in snow, or place it over rocks, or possibly something that's more like a wing. But they have some limitations when there's a lot of wind or snow to be dealt with. So it's not always necessary that you get a 4-season tent. I'm just going to go very quickly through different peaks that we climb at and some suggestions for going around the world. So one is Donner Peak. This is up by Tahoe. Castle Peak, that's off Alpha 80. Continue on. Mount Talac near Tahoe. Pyramid Peak near Desolation Wilderness. And then further abroad in California, there's Mount Shasta again. Are all of these items from Southern California up north, not to be exclusive of the 14,000 foot peaks in California. Those are some of the best. Moving further abroad in the western U.S., we've got the whole Cascade Range, the Tetons, the Wind Rivers, the Rockies, and the Wasatch Ranges. And then all the way up to Alaska, Canada, and down south of Mexico, there's plenty of mountains to climb. Moving abroad to the big guys like way up in Alaska on Mount McKinley. We have a team on Mount McKinley right now, or Denali, rather. And there's a coast range in British Columbia, which also has very demanding peaks to climb. We'd like to get to soon. That's Mount St. Elias, one of the biggest in the world in terms of mass. Continue on. Andes, we're going there in July. Patagonia, probably going there next year. Kilimanjaro, going there in February. The Alps, we were going to Mont Blanc, but that one had to be canceled this year, but we summited that mountain last year. And there's many other ranges in Europe. Further abroad than that, there's Alps in Australia, New Zealand, China, Russia, even in Antarctica, and the Himalaya. My favorite that I'm going to climb someday is the solar system's largest peak on Mars at 88,000 feet, Olympus Mons. Hope you can join me.
Excellent.
So wrapping it up, some things that we do in SMC, our goal is to help us connect, learn, and climb together. And we're quite a few hundred active paying members and quite a few thousand members otherwise free and on Meetup. We're hoping to continue to grow, so we're glad you guys are here. I'm going to give you a short rundown on our training courses, and then we're wrapping up. Here's some of the things that we offer, like seminars, women-only events, expedition climbing, and training on ice, rock, and snow, and many others. We want to make sure that when you guys come out with us, that we help you build a foundation and get the knowledge that you need and the skills so that you can do it on your own or with us, learn how to be a great team player and have a successful, rewarding experience. We have, to accomplish that, we have a series of training courses. They're all broken into 3 levels. This would be beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And this first one is MTN, or Mountain. So these are all 2-day courses, and they also all have an online component, which helps pre-qualify you for participation. Then we have our SIG courses, which stands for Snow, Ice, and Glacier. Same thing, 1, 2, and 3. Basically, 1, 2, and 3 in this and rock, which is coming up next, is beginner, roped, and lead. Okay, lead climbing. Same thing with rock. Rock 1, 2, and 3 also has related online components to help you pre-qualify. There's a number of days inside of each one of these categories, but it's rock 1, beginner, rock 2, intermediate, rock 3, advanced, and we also have rescue courses at the end. So here's a couple books. The one I mentioned. You might also want to get this book, The High Sierra, which is useful for all the peaks that we're going to be climbing here in California. And there's a version of this everywhere you go. And there's other various books and places online that you can go to get reviews, information, and inspiration. Summit Post, Mountain Project, and there's tons. So you guys can find that on